I just wanted to plant some fruit. That's it. Simple. No big deal. A small orchard at the back of my house, which, by the way, is in a fairly quiet neighborhood, if you ignore the fact that there's a lunatic on the street who seems to have been born to turn any everyday situation into an international crisis. And I'm not talking about exaggeration. I'm serious. The plot of land I bought had the look of a place that screams, "Plant a jabuticaba tree here." So that's what I did. I planted jabuticaba, oranges, mangoes, lemons, even guavas got in on the fun. I watered with care, used organic fertilizer, everything just right. It was a source of pride to see that little corner flourishing, even with the busy routine of my job. But then the show began. At first, it was subtle. That woman who lives next door, a figure who looks like she came out of a Facebook meme from the 2010s, kept watching my yard with a mixture of disgust and suspicion, as if I were building an illegal laboratory and not just watering some fruit seedlings. Sometimes I'd pass by and she'd pretend to be cleaning the sidewalk, but always with that clinical look of someone about to press a red emergency button. So far, so good, each with their own weirdness. But everything really started to go wrong when, one Saturday morning, I was out in the yard putting new stakes in the tangerine trees, and suddenly I heard a car pull up in front of my house. You know that dramatic break? That was it. And who gets out? A guy in a moss green vest, a ridiculous brooch on his chest, and a ticket book in his hand. Behind him, of course, she, arms crossed, smiling like a soap opera villain and with the posture of someone who thinks she's saving the planet. "Are you responsible for this area?" the man asked, looking at my orchard as if I had erected an illegal refinery. I said yes, even though I anticipated that the day would yield a story to tell. He introduced himself as the environmental delegate. Delegate, environmental. I almost laughed, but I held it in. He began to say that there were serious complaints of irregular deforestation, misuse of the land, aggression against wildlife, all of this pointing at my fruit trees, the orange trees. Yes, my dears, I was being accused of an environmental crime for planting oranges. She, the complainant, just stared at me with that superior look, as if she was about to be canonized for her services to the environment. And look, the most green there is in her yard is the chipped paint on the wall and a plastic pot with a dying fern. It got so absurd that I began to think it was a prank. I asked where the documents were, the official car, the ID. The guy started winding me up, saying that the papers were in the car, that he was going to get them, that the city hall system was down. Look at the classic, that it was an emergency operation and that it wasn't possible to show everything there at that moment. And there she was, pretending to be just a concerned citizen, when in fact she was the protagonist of an Oscar-worthy prank. All this because, apparently, the smell of lemon blossom was interfering with her well-being. Yes, that was the claim in the note she had left a few days earlier, as if it was normal to leave a note complaining about the smell of flowers. While the man was trying to convince me to sign a piece of environmental summons, handwritten on sulfite paper with a header printed on an old printer, she was walking around saying things like, "It's absurd what they're doing to nature," and "If nobody does anything, we have to act." It was almost like a suburban eco-activist speech, but little did she know that the nobody doing anything, there was me. And yes, I was. Because, you see, I'm simply the director of the Municipal Environment Department. That's all. The woman was trying to fine me, using a fifth-rate actor pretending to be a delegate, because of an orchard that was legalized, inspected, and encouraged by the town hall itself, by myself. And at that moment, my friends, I decided I wasn't going to tell her who I was. Not yet. At that moment, I confess, a part of me wanted to pull my work permit out of my pocket, stand up tall and say, "Honey, you're trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the guy who signs the reports you falsified." But no, that would have been too quick, too easy. And she deserved a little more stage time to show the entire script of the play she put on. The theater needed to run one more act before the curtain fell. The guy in the green vest kept insisting that I had to sign the notification. There were a few sentences written in a font that looked like a doctor's prescription. Invasive species, risk of soil contamination, disturbance of local fauna, local. As if the pigeon shitting on her roof was an endangered brown bear. And there I was, holding back my laughter so hard that I almost created an emotional hernia. The woman was already agitated, talking loudly, pointing at my land as if she were witnessing an environmental crime in progress. At one point, she burst out, "Those trees are illegal. Those fruits are genetically modified. That's for sure. That stuff gives you cancer." I swear to everything that is most sacred in the Manual of Good Environmental Practice. I almost fell to the floor, laughing my ass off. "Genetically modified. The orange trees," she added, with the firmness of someone who has read an article on a dubious blog. "Those jabuticaba trees. They're hybrids. They pollute the soil." As if a tree had the power to emit CO2 on an industrial scale just because it didn't match the aesthetics of her white picket fence. I was already thinking about getting some popcorn and a mango juice from the orchard itself, as absurd as that was getting. And then came the comical moment of the morning. The environmental delegate said that, as part of the inspection protocol, he needed to take soil samples. He opened a little case that looked more like a makeup bag, took a stainless steel spoon, I swear an ordinary tablespoon, and started digging near an acerola tree. All serious, as if he were extracting oil. I asked, just to see where it would end up. "Which laboratory are you going to take this to?" He replied, "There's a center in Denver that analyzes contamination by illegal fertilizers. I'll send it straight there." Of course, I can just imagine the scientists in Denver stopping everything they're doing to analyze a spoonful of dried clay that this crazy guy picked up in the backyard of a residential neighborhood in the name of the toxic acerola patrol. At this point, she was already in the throes of an outburst. She said she was going to get the neighbors together, sign a petition, send it to the local newspaper, report it on TV, call some green Instagram influencer to protest at my gate. All because, according to her, my orchard was affecting the biodiversity of the neighborhood. Guys, the most biodiversity there is on that street is 2 stray cats and a dying fern hanging from her balcony. The neighborhood has more concrete than nature, but in her mind, those fruit trees were a direct attack on the existence of wildlife. And not only that, she accused my lemon tree of attracting evil mosquitoes. She used those words, evil mosquitoes, as if I had summoned a swarm of winged demons with a bag of organic fertilizer. When the guy had finished collecting the soil and put the spoon away in his makeup bag, he handed me a sheet saying that this was a warning and that if I didn't take action, I would be fined $1,000 a day. $1,000 a day. I almost asked him to repeat it, just so I could hear this madness again with more conviction. Then, like someone who doesn't want anything, I made a face and said, "You know I work with the environment, right?" She froze on the spot. The man also froze. I continued calmly. "By the way, I'm the director of the city's environment department. I can even show you my badge if you like." The silence was immediate, the kind of silence that only happens when the shit hits the fan. She widened her eyes as if she'd seen a ghost. And then, my friends, she had the audacity to say, "Ah, so you must already know that what you're doing here is ethically dubious." Now she wanted to be a lecturer. Ethics. Coming from someone who set up a fake operation with a guy and a soup spoon trying to give me a fictitious fine. Ethics. Coming from the same person who had already called the police once because the neighbor's dog barked during her yoga. The fake deputy didn't know whether to run or pretend to be a plumber. He started stuttering, tried to change the subject, asked if he could go to the bathroom. All I said was, "I think you'd better leave before I call the real police." He left so quickly that he forgot his briefcase on my sidewalk. She still tried to hold it together, said that everything was being filmed and that she was going to consult her lawyers. I just said, Good. Have them call me. I'm in the system. Name, Director of the Department of the Environment. They'll find me easily. And I went into the house, laughing a lot. And the best part, eating a fresh mango from my orchard. After that pathetic show in my backyard, I thought the woman would go into hiding for a few days, process the shame, gather up the shreds of dignity, and pretend that nothing had happened. But no, it seems she was born programmed to go beyond the limits of human audacity, as if there were a world championship for clueless people and she was competing for a gold medal. 2 days later, I was coming home from work, tired, with a full head of steam, and all I wanted to do was take a shower, make some tapioca, and sit on the sofa. But as soon as I parked, I noticed a strange movement in front of my house. Some cones on the ground, some yellow tape, and 2 people measuring with a tape measure, walking back and forth as if they were preparing a crime scene. And guess who was coordinating it all? She herself. Now wearing a cap that read Green Committee, a fluorescent vest, and holding a clipboard. When I asked her what was going on, she simply replied, without even looking me in the face, "We're carrying out a technical survey to reclassify areas of ecological impact." I laughed. It had to be a joke. She was trying to turn my backyard into a fabricated environmental sanctuary, as if those fruit trees had become the last refuge of Amazonian fauna. And the most impressive thing was that she acted with the greatest naturalness in the world, as if she really was authorized to do that. I began to realize that she had a rare ability. She lied so confidently, with such conviction, that for a second you almost believed it, except that I had already passed the stage of surprise. Now it was pure debauchery. I asked her again who had authorized the clowning on my land, and she had the nerve to say that it was a community project, that the town hall had been notified, and that the environment secretary himself, yes, she said that, had given a positive sign. Detail: the secretary was me. Guys, the woman was quoting me as the source of approval for the operation she herself had invented. She didn't know whether to stick her face in a hole or continue acting, so she chose the second option and started talking about reforestation programs, urban mapping, and protection of biomes threatened by fruit speculation. Speculation? Fruitful. That was new even to me. But what really made me indignant was realizing that she had taken the theatrics to another level. She started spreading posters around the neighborhood, saying that my orchard represented an ecological risk. The posters had pictures of my trees with red circles around them, like scenes from CSI, and phrases like alert, soil under investigation, contaminated fruit, know the silent dangers in your neighborhood, and the classic protect your children. Yes, she was spreading the word that my lemon tree was a threat to public health. There was one poor neighbor who asked me at the pharmacy if it was true that my tangerine tree caused headaches in children. Another thought that the smell of guava caused hormonal disturbances in cats. That was the level of misinformation, and she spoke with an almost religious enthusiasm, as if she had finally discovered her divine mission. But the icing on the cake came one morning when I received a formal notice in my mailbox, a brown envelope with the stamp of an independent Natural Preservation Institute, an entity that, no surprise, doesn't exist. Inside, a document in Times New Roman font, triple-spaced, saying that my land would be submitted to a reevaluation process as an environmentally sensitive area, and that I should therefore suspend all non-native vegetative activities immediately. Hello? What would be a non-native vegetative activity? Planting bananas? And yes, the paper said that I had 48 hours to respond to the records, and that, if I didn't, a formal complaint would be forwarded to the competent body, including federal instances. Signed, General Supervision of Urban Environmental Conflicts. Sounds official, right? But I'm literally the person in charge of these issues in the city, and I can assure you, this body is as real as a vegan unicorn. That's when I realized that the woman wasn't just clueless. She was dangerous. Because it's one thing to be annoying, to bother your neighbors, to complain about noise. It's quite another to forge documents, invent entities, and spread lies throughout an entire neighborhood to support a personal environmental outbreak. I decided it was time to act more firmly. I gathered all the evidence, photos of the fake inspector, videos of the approach, copies of the posters, records of the notifications, and even an audio of her threatening to take the case to the national media if necessary. I put together a dossier so complete that it could be published as a book. And the best part, I didn't have to make any effort to prove the absurdity. The material spoke for itself. But before I took legal action, I wanted to see how far it went. If there was any moral break, some shame, some limit. Because, frankly, it seemed like she had plunged into a bubble where she was the great heroine of a world where mango trees were villains and gardeners were environmental criminals. And then, as if everything she'd already done wasn't enough, she decided to enter the parallel universe where growing fruit in your backyard is a federal crime. But now, she didn't just want to destroy my orchard with rumors and false documents. She decided to invade. Yes. That's what you read. Invade. The creature, driven by a mixture of hatred, frustration, and, I don't know, some kind of herbal tea, jumped over the wall of my house with 2 garbage bags full of leaves and seeds that nobody asked for. And not satisfied, she started replanting my land. When I arrived and saw the scene, it took me a few seconds to realize it was real. She was wearing pink gardening gloves, kneeling on the ground as if she owned the place, throwing random seeds into the middle of my trees. What's worse, she was narrating what she was doing out loud, as if she were recording a pirated Discovery Channel documentary. "These seeds are from a forgotten native species," she said, as she threw a handful into a shallow hole. Then she looked up and added, "Nature needs me." I stood there for a moment, trying to decide whether to laugh, call the police, or call an exorcist. Because it was no longer just an outburst, it was a complete performance. An attempted green coup with a script and everything. When she saw me, she feigned surprise. "Oh, I just came to help. I saw that the soil was becoming acidified, so I brought some species that regenerate naturally." I didn't know whether to be annoyed by her audacity or her clueless creativity. I tried to keep my composure. I spoke calmly, even though my blood was boiling. "You broke into my house. You're planting things without my permission. You're completely out of touch with reality." She stood up, wiping her hands on her vest, and replied with a cynical smile, "Actually, this space is now technically an emergency environmental recovery zone. I've notified the town hall." Look, the only thing she notified was my liver, which went into automatic attack mode. I went inside, grabbed my cell phone, called the police, and asked for immediate assistance for trespassing. Meanwhile, she kept walking around the yard as if she were the curator of a municipal park, pointing at the trees and making faces, saying that some were in pain. When the police arrived, she still tried to reason with the officers. She said she was representative of the neighborhood's ecological conscience, that I was committing a crime against urban biodiversity, and that she had moral jurisdiction over that space. Moral jurisdiction. Yes, she meant it. The policeman looked at her like someone who looks at a child who has invented an entire planet to justify why he ate the last piece of cake. It was no use. She was taken away. Not arrested, unfortunately, but taken away for clarification. And that's when, with my complete dossier in hand, I finally decided to take official action. I took legal action. I gathered evidence of defamation, trespassing, attempted environmental fraud, falsifying documents, and disturbing the peace. And, as icing on the cake, I requested a compulsory psychological evaluation. Because, no matter how blind justice is, you can't pretend that a woman like this is thinking straight. The process ran, and it went quickly. to my surprise. Probably because the judge read all that paperwork and thought, is this serious? There was so much evidence, and it was so ridiculous that it was like a comedy episode. There was a hearing, and she showed up in a beige blazer, trying to play the victim. She said she was acting out of a sense of duty to the earth. She even used the expression, guardian of the green. Her lawyer was sweating more than a hot pot lid. Mine, on the other hand, was enjoying himself, because for every sentence she uttered, we had a video, a printout, or an audio that broke it all down. In the end, the judge not only won the case, but ordered a fine for moral damages, an obligation to publicly retract the statement, and forbade her to come within 200 meters of my house. She was also forced to pay the costs of the case and repair the damage to my orchard, including hiring an official agronomist appointed by me to reevaluate the plants she tried to recover. And as if I wasn't already up to my neck in shame, the case ended up in the police column of the local newspaper. Woman forges environmental authority and invades legal orchard. It became a joke in the neighborhood. It became a meme in a WhatsApp group. Even the town hall staff got wind of it. A colleague sent me a sticker with the words, "Protect your fruit. Karen is on the loose." And I proudly stuck it on the fridge. These days, she hardly leaves the house anymore. She disappeared with that green committee vest and never spoke of my orchard again. In fact, she's been walking down the street as if I were an Interpol agent disguised as a fruit grower. And you know what? It's better that way. As for my orchard, it's more beautiful than ever. The trees have grown. They're full of life. And I've even built a wooden stool in the middle of the orange trees so I can sit and laugh remembering this whole story. And every time someone asks me why there's a Fruta Segura sticker on my gate, I answer as calmly as I can. Because here, my son, the only thing illegal was that woman's madness. And don't forget to leave your like and comment below.